A horse is a horse, of course, unless, of course, that horse is hiding some strengths you don't know about. Hi, I'm Jeff O, also known as Digital Romad on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. And today's video on Photo Finish Live racing is really about diving down the rabbit hole to understand the horse that you have and where his strengths really are. And I'm using MJ Informatics to pinpoint prototype. And the horse we're using is Braveheart. It's a horse I picked up in a claiming race recently for 10,000 Derby. And the reason I picked up this horse, the reason I put a claim in on him, is because of what I found in MJ Informatics, which is what this entire video is all about. But first, a little bit about Braveheart. He's an A- horse. He's age 8, so he's an old guy. He's a boomer in the PFL world. And clearly, this is his last couple of weeks of racing before he goes to the breeder barn and has fun mating with a bunch of digital fillies. But I bought him, or I put a claim in him, I should say, because I thought he might stand out as a potential mate in breeding, because he has a solid number of stars, 7.5 stars, 3 of them being soft. So I'm not mad at that. And when you look at his career summary, he's been in 94 races. He's picked up nearly 70,000 in career earnings, and he's had a fairly decent sized purse at 7,000. And so he's been, on the podium 33% of the time. So 1 out of every 3 races, this horse is on the podium. So I think potentially he has, the possibility of picking up a few mates in the breeder barn, which is where I'm going to earn back my 10,000 Derby over time. But until we get there, I wanted to potentially run this horse just for fun for a couple of weeks and see how much of the 10,000 I could reclaim just on racing him. And I wanted to see if I could improve on the 33% podium appearances by really digging into where this horse best opportunities for income really exist. And to do that, I went to mjinformatics.com, which I encourage everybody to use. I mean, it is a fantastic source of data that you can carve up a million different ways. This is really what this video is all about. But this initial sort, I'm sorting it by position. So you can see that at 12 furlongs, in theory, Braveheart should, finish probably around number 3. When we go down to the 10 furlong races, he should finish probably closer to 4, etc. You can see that through here. And you can see what his average finish is and some of his statistics. So what this is saying, the lower the number, the better. So at 12 furlongs, his average finish is in the 43%, which basically means that in a 10-horse race, you would expect Braveheart to finish 4.3 basically, or, one of the top 4 horses in that particular race. In an 11-horse race, or I'm sorry, 11 furlong race, 10 horses, you would expect him to be 4.6 or closer to 5th position. Again, not bad. So in those top 3 distances, 10, 11, 12, he's going to finish in the top half of the pack. Typically, that's where he was typically going to run. So in a 6-horse race, you would expect to see him finish on the podium, at number 3, likely. His win play show percentage, or the podium percentage, I call it, is pretty high. I mean, he's 50% to 60% of the time, he is going to be on the podium in these particular races, 4, 6, 11, 10, 12. And you can see over here his profit. I mean, he's profitable at a long distance race, 12 furlongs. Marginally profitable at a 10 furlong race, and not profitable anything beyond that. So my initial read is that, theoretically I want to run this horse at 10, 11, 12 furlongs. That seems to be where the interesting opportunities are with this horse, just from an overall perspective. And what I mean by overall perspective we'll come to in just a moment, because we're going to start really digging deep into this horse. But initially, this is a right-turning turf horse, but he's had some success left-turning turf, and he's had some success on right-turning dirt. I don't really care about that. There's not enough success there for me to want to use him in that way. So I'm going to focus specifically on his strengths, which is right turning turf. And particularly from this chart, we can see that his best races come in sloppy and soft conditions. Again, the smaller the bar here, the better it is. So 25 is the number of races here, 9 is the number of races, etc. But if you go across, you can see, that roughly 42% of the time, he's going to be on the podium in sloppy conditions. In soft conditions, it's closer to about 60% of the time. But clearly, soft and sloppy is where this horse likes to run. And we can get some more information here about his speed. So, if you look at 9, 10, 11, 12, he is sort of midway up or even better in that, that sort of square bar area there, which means he's, average, a little better than average at 9, 10, 11, 12. And then when we go over here to his average fleet ratings, he's a little better. So 10, 11, 12, he is above average in those particular kinds of races, which again, just sort of confirms to me that 10, 11, 12 is likely the sweet spot for this horse, but we want to go deeper than that. This is just sort of surface analysis. We want to start revising what this horse's races really look like, because in truth, every possibility here isn't a reality. And what I mean by that is, when you first start looking at the MJ Informatics information, everything is included. So every type of grade, every type of race, every type of distance, every type of conditions you're going to face and track surfaces and everything. So you really want to begin to hone in on where the real strengths are by dialing in certain types of conditions and races and distances and whatnot. So overall, every race this horse has run, every race Braveheart has run, he's run 60 of them across all conditions. But we want to begin pulling that apart. And here's what I mean. When I go to event type, I want to focus just on the events that this horse is going to run, the type of races this horse is going to run. I'm not going to run him in a claiming race. I bought him in a claiming race for 10,000. I don't expect I'm going to put him up and get anything above 10,000 when there's only a couple of weeks left in his final season. So running him in claiming races really makes no sense. I'm not going to run him in graded races because they're more expensive to run. And again, I'm not looking to put a bunch of money into this horse. I really want to recoup my 10,000 through breeding over the next many seasons. But that said, I do want to play around with him for the next couple of weeks and just see how he runs in his prototype races and try and recoup a little bit of Derby and some Crown along the way for running him for fun. And I'm not going to run him in maiden races, obviously, because he's not a maiden anymore. So I'm going to get rid of all of those, and I'm going to focus on the only races that this horse is ever going to run under my pasture bedtime stables. I'm going to run him in allowance races, handicap restricted, and restricted stakes. That's the only thing he's going to run. And when you do that, suddenly we go from 60 races that he's been involved in to just 46. Those 46 begin to define what this horse is really capable of and where his strengths are. And you can see information begins to change. His positions begin to change. Suddenly, we have the 4 furlong race in there that he's theoretically pretty good at. You would expect him to be, in 4th position, maybe 5th position in a 10-horse race in a 4 furlong race. But his average finishes begin to change. He gets a little worse. His percentage of time showing up in the podium begins to get a little worse, and his profit actually begins to fall off a bit at 12. And there's no other race distance at which he is profitable. So suddenly Braveheart is looking actually a little worse for the wear than he looked in originally when you start having the claiming races and the maiden races and all that in there. His condition preference stays the same. He likes sloppy and soft. That's fine. I'm not too worried about that. We know where this horse is going to run. But when you start looking at his speed, he begins to, it's roughly the same. But if you go back and look at it closely, he actually is slightly weaker in these conditions. So he's again not looking like the best horse there is out there. But we know that this is a sloppy and soft runner. So I'm going to take out all of the fast, good, and yielding conditions because I'm not going to run him in that. There's no reason for me to waste my time running him in that because it's just not his jam. It's not where he's going to do his best. So when we get rid of all the races conditions he's not going to run in, well, suddenly he's an entirely different horse. When you look at just the sloppy and soft races that he runs, he really looks a heck of a lot stronger. His finish positions are stronger across the board. His average finishes improve across the board for the most part. His percentage time on the podium really improves, and you can see that his profit really improves as well when you get rid of those claiming and maiden races. So this is clearly a horse that is improving along the way as we begin to revise what kind of race really defines his prototype. His conditions are going to remain the same soft and sloppy. So that's not really going to change anything. But when we get rid of all those fast and good and yielding races, suddenly his speed is much better. He's at the top end on 10 and 11, and he's barely above average on 12. But look at his fleet figures, his average fleet figures. He really begins to improve, particularly at the 12 furlong, where he's really at the top of his game. I like that. I like seeing these kinds of improvements because it tells me now we're beginning to hone in on where this horse strength really exists. And you can begin to see that, or you can actually, I should say, you can really see that when you start looking at where this horse is in various parts of the races. So at 12 furlongs, early on, we expect he's going to be middle of the pack for the most part. Again, the lower the number, the better. So this is saying early in this race, in a 12 furlong race with, say, 10 horses, we would expect him to be roughly in the fifth position, 53%. By the middle of the race, he's improved his position to just a little bit better than fourth position. And by the end of the race, he is in second position. So clearly this horse has closing speed. Starts off in the middle, improves midway through the race, and by the end of the race, he is really sort of feeling his Wheaties, feeling his oats. He's doing his best, he's running his fastest, and he's closing really, really well. That doesn't happen in a middle furlong race like 7 furlongs. He starts middle of the pack, he improves a little bit, but then he falls off. And it's because he just doesn't have enough time, enough furlongs left for his speed to really kick in. Same with shorter furlongs. He starts off sort of deep in the pack. He gets worse midway through a short race, and he just doesn't have time, even though he's improving, he doesn't have time by the time this race is over for his speed to have really kicked in. So he's just clearly not a short distance and middle furlong racer. Just doesn't work for him. But it does clearly work in 10 and 11 furlongs. Again, we're talking about longer furlongs. He starts off middle of the pack. He improves a little bit, still middle of the pack, improves a little bit, but then he really improves going into the last part of the race. We expect him to finish somewhere in the fourth or fifth position. So it tells me he is improving in these longer furlong races, which gives me information I can use as I begin to think about, okay, where do I really want to run Braveheart? I want to run him, in these longer races. So in my final sort here, I've focused just on the 10, 11, 12 furlong races, and we can see that in those races, we expect him to finish really well. So in a 10 horse race again, at 12 furlongs, we would expect to see him, finish probably in second position. In a 10 furlong race, he's going to finish fourth or fifth, probably closer to fifth. And an 11 furlong race, he's going to finish probably about fourth. And I don't mind that. That doesn't make me mad because I'm going to get paid in many of these races at 4 furlongs. And in some of these races, depending which ones I go into, I might get paid in fifth position. So this tells me I'm going to earn more money than just what the win, play, show percentage shows. But look at that win, play, show percentage. I mean, we're talking about 75% of the time he's going to be up on the podium, at 12 furlongs, 57% of the time at 10, and 50% of the time with 11 furlongs. And you can see here that his win play show on just these three types of races, 10, 11, 12 furlongs, nearly doubles his percentage podium that he had originally. So, originally we're looking at 33% of the time he was going to be on the podium with a win place or a show. But suddenly, when we focus it on 10, 11, 12 furlongs, just soft and sloppy conditions, and just in the type of races that this horse is going to run, we can expect he's going to be on the podium nearly 60% of the time. So we've nearly doubled our initial podium percentage. And if you look at 12 in particular, this horse is going to be first or second in those races most of the time. And his win play show is that, every four races he runs, we expect he's going to be on the podium three times. Now, again, this is statistical. It's not going to, necessarily happen that way every single time, but it gives us a view of where the real strength is for this horse. I know I want to run him in these long races because that's where the best opportunity for Braveheart to show up on the podium exists. So for me, I want to run Braveheart specifically at 12 furlongs. I'm going to be okay running him at 10 or 11 if I can't find a 12 furlong race that fits his prototype. I really want to go 100% rein because that's going to give me the best opportunity for the sloppy and soft conditions that this horse is going to excel at. I will go down to 80%, even though there is a chance I'm going to get a yielding in there and he's probably not going to do well. So for me, the perfect race is 12 furlongs on turf, running right in 100% rain conditions. If I have to, I will go down to 10 or 11 in 80% conditions and still expect he has a pretty good shot of at least getting onto the podium. But for me, playing around with this horse for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to look for every 12 furlong race I can that's running at 100% rain because I think he has a pretty good shot of earning back some money for me in those prototype conditions. And with that, I will say special thanks to @xmj_gamingx on Twitter. I've become friends with him there. I think he does a fantastic job with MJ Informatics. I think it's an incredibly useful tool for those who really want to pull apart their horses 1,000 different ways to hone in on the specifics that define where that horse's strengths are. You've got to dive down that rabbit hole to get there, but the information you come up with can really help you improve your photo finish live track record. So check it out at mjinformatics.com. And with that, I'll say see you on the podium.